Hope everybody is doing well. It's time for another online dinner party. We've got two amazing guests, and we may have a third one joining us as well. But I hope everybody is doing good. I had a very good weekend. As a matter of fact, yesterday went and watched the New York Yankees survive, at least in this game, and make it to game four as they were down 2-0. Now they're down 2-1, and they were playing the Toronto Blue Jays. But a friend of mine had run into a gentleman that was into the blues music, and he knew that I was into blues music as well. So he wanted me to meet this particular gentleman. So we were sharing interesting encounters with blues legends like Buddy Guy and definitely Bobby Blue Bland's son, and a number of other folks as well. So it was definitely a good conversation. And then I ran into a gentleman that might have known and sometimes people that know those folks are a little coy in what they say and everything, but he may have known a gang legend and all in that space. But he was of a different generation, but definitely a lot of people know Frank Matthews because of the movie American Gangster, and there were other people that were associated with that as well, and his family may have been associated with that particular family or not, who knows. But definitely it was interesting running into him, and also running into somebody, I believe it was an uncle of Pam Grier, a famous African American actress, and all along those lines. And I think Rosie Grier, the athlete, is related to them as well. So it was interesting having those conversations, and also finding out that the bartender was from my hometown of Warrenton. So there might even be some commonality between the generation above him and everything like that, because I'm thinking he might be in his 40s or 50s. I'm in my 60s. I think he was saying that some of his relatives that are in their 70s grew up in that area, so he knew the high school and the junior high and some of the other things that I had to go on to. And some people know Warrenton because of the famous Horace Greeley quote, which is "Go West, young man." But definitely, I think it was from some health issues that he wound up stopping in that small town, and there is a historical plaque that honors that fact, that he stopped in that town, and it wasn't going west at that time. I guess he was going east, but he definitely was known for that famous quote. And I think that he was a journalist, if I remember correctly, and I guess he was trying to tell folks to go west in order to be successful. And that was probably at the time of the gold rush and all of those other things as well. And I don't know if my guests are into sports cars. I'm gonna find out if they are or are not. But there was a kind of a festival type thing. I think they had like 400 Porsches or something like that, and I think it has like a German name. And they travel around the country and all along those lines. So they stopped in Durham, North Carolina, with these 400 Porsches, not counting the people that drove their individual Porsches. So there might have been somewhere like 600 or 700 Porsches around Durham, North Carolina on Saturday, because there was a street festival in front of the Cultural Arts Center that I work at that will be celebrating its 25th anniversary, I believe, next year, and everything, the Phoenix Festival. But the Porsche thing, it was its first time here in this area, in an area called American Tobacco, which is across the street from the newer Durham Bulls Stadium, and all along those lines. But yeah, there was a lot of folks that were into those fast cars and those Porsches, because I think these were the ones from, like, I think the gentleman told me, the 50s or the 60s up until like maybe the late 90s or something like that, the early 2000s, that were known for speed before they started changing some of their models. They're still known for speed, but they were definitely known for opening it up and even being on racetracks and all along those lines. So definitely, even Bob Ingram, who has passed away, was known for his collection. Unfortunately, a gas explosion destroyed a lot of his cars, and he's since passed away. But the family, the Ingram experience, is still keeping up with the cars that they were able to save. And I think they helped bring this particular event to town and all along those lines. So that was something that was going on in the community as well. And then last but not least, on Sunday, I've got to do a better job of exercise. I don't know how James got to do, but I've definitely got to do a better job of exercise. And there was another type of festival in Durham that was trying to get people to bicycle, use their walking, and get around town and be more mobile. They actually played off of the bull in the word mobile and everything, in order to give the this particular festival a name. And I ran into a new gym and got to do 30 knee bends, because you would roll a number, and then they would have you do an exercise, whether it was knee bends, whether it was sit ups, whether it was lifting small weights or a number of other things. I rolled a 30 and had to do those knee bends. And I have not been in an exercise gym in a long time. So I shocked myself that I was able to do it. So, yeah, sometimes pleasantly good that you can shock yourself. And I'm hoping to get them on this show as well. And I'm also hoping to get by and maybe even get a gym membership and get out more. I know that I need to get out in nature more as well. So that's some of the things that have been going on in my life. I'm glad to see that my Brewers, if you're a baseball fan, are 2-0 as well. They are playing the Cubs this evening, as a matter of fact, in about an hour and a half. And hopefully they can close out that series in Chicago, even though it can be difficult to close out a series in a enemy territory and all along those lines. But they've got 3 shots to close out the series, and I would love it if they would just close it out now, because there's a good possibility that they'll have to face the Dodgers, because the Dodgers are up 2-0 as well. So there might be some people closing out the series or not, because I know Seattle and the team they're playing, I think that that's a 2-1 series, if I remember correctly. And I think it faces or is favoring the Mariners. So I was doing that and watching some football. And if you're into fantasy football and all along those lines, I hope your team is doing better than mine, because I'm 1-4, and I'm really mad at the quarterback on the last game, because I was hoping that he was going to hand the ball over to Travis Etienne. Etienne would run in, I'd get the points, I would have won the game. Instead, the quarterback ran in after he tripped and failed, and then he managed to get back up and run in and score. And that was the Kansas City Jacksonville game, and all along those lines. So because of that incident happening, I fell to 1-4. Hey, you can't win everything. So that's just the way life goes. But I'm going to bring in a lady that knows about music and everything like that. So Jane Eisner is with me. And how are you doing, Jane? Like I said, I've been following everything from sports to entertainment to a number of other things in town. There was even a comedian in town that was there, because I was talking to one of the ambassadors, because some of these venues have ambassadors and all along those lines. So I was talking to one of those, and they were telling me about the comedian, and I'm trying to remember his name, but it's not coming to me. But apparently he had a nice following, because there were a lot of people walking there as well. So I don't know if you're into Porsches, but I just got at the tail end. I did not spend the money to go to the full festival. Plus I was working one of my other jobs and everything like that. But I did get to see 40, 50 of them. So maybe a tenth of the ones that they had out there and everything like that. So I don't know if you are a person that ever got into sports cars, or if you've just been following people like Carole King and all along those lines. So tell folks a little bit about yourself as well.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm speaking to you from New York City, where I live in Manhattan. I'm a born and bred New Yorker. I went to college in Connecticut. I did graduate work at the School of Journalism at Columbia. But then I worked in a bunch of different places. I worked for the Norfolk Virginian Pilot in Virginia, and then spent 25 years in Philadelphia, where I worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And that's where my husband and I raised our 3 daughters.
Oh,
And I did spend a couple of years at the National Constitution Center, which is a fantastic education center right on Independence Mall in Philadelphia. And then I was recruited to run the Forward, which is a large national Jewish news organization. And I did that for more than a decade. And then left the Forward to work at my alma mater at the journalism school, which I did for 4 years, and then really wanted to finish writing this book and doing some freelancing. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. The book was published on June 16th, and I've spoken to a real lot of people like yourself all around the country. There seems to be a big interest in Carole King, her music, her life story. This is the first biography just of her. So I think that's why it's unusual. And I certainly hope that people will find readers will find it entertaining, enlightening, maybe a little, saddening. She had a very complicated personal life, but amazing, amazing music.
Yeah, definitely some amazing music and all of those lines. I'm definitely a big music fan of all types. Like I said, I mentioned that I'm a blues fan, having worked at the Blues Festival, the Bull Durham Blues Festival that was here for a number of years and is now on hiatus. There are some people like myself that are hoping that it will come back at some point or another, but it did have a nice long run and a lot of great history. Seeing Buddy Guy a number of times, seeing Coco Taylor, seeing Isaac Hayes, seeing a lot of other great blues musicians because of working that blues festival and everything like that. Never had the pleasure of seeing Carole King in while she was living and everything like that, but definitely I've heard some of
Well,
her.
she's still alive.
Okay,
Yeah, she's 83 years old and lives in Idaho.
okay, so she's in Idaho and everything. So you haven't had the pleasure. Who knows? Is she still performing? Is she still out there performing on the circuit? Because Buddy Guy is up there in his 80s and he's still out there on the circuit. I'm oftentimes amazed because he has more energy than some 20-year-olds that I know.
Well, no, she's not regularly performing anymore. She is an environmental activist,
Mhm.
gets involved in politics, and in particular to help preserve the Rockies,
Right.
the mountain system that is right near her. But she is not. Like some of her peers, like Paul Simon or James Taylor, she's not out there on the road all the time anymore.
And James Taylor definitely has some deep roots to North Carolina as well because
Yes,
he has some
yes.
very deep roots in this area. So I'm definitely familiar with his music as well as Carole King's and all of those lines. You mentioned a couple of places, and I said earlier that they and that you worked at as a journalist that are sports oriented, and we are in the middle of baseball season. So are you one of those folks that is a Yankee or a Phillies fan, or you or your husband don't really get into those sports, or do you get into them at all? Because I do know that there are a lot of teams, including if you want to go to football, the 76ers in basketball and definitely the Eagles in football that have done quite well in those sports. So I just wondered, were y'all sports enthusiasts, you and your husband?
Well, my husband, not really at all, surprisingly. When we lived in Philadelphia, it was a little hard to root for the Phillies because they kept on losing. Not a big football fan, although certainly there's been an enormous amount of excitement over the Eagles in the last couple of years. But you know what, Mark? My late father was a Mets fan.
Wow.
And when I was growing up just outside New York City, like I remember when the Mets won that World Series in 1969, it was so exciting. I kept the front page of the New York Times for years. And it's been really, really sweet to see my grandson, who was growing up in Brooklyn, be a Mets fan. And so I kind of feel like my father is living through him. Of course, sadly, this season the Mets are out. He doesn't mind the Yankees, uh, but definitely a Mets fan.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because a lot of people that are older, my grandfather was and I didn't realize this till talking to my aunt and others, was a diehard Dodgers fan because at that time they were the Brooklyn Dodgers. They were not the
Yes,
LA Dodgers and
yes,
everything. So a lot of people did not have teams per se in the Carolinas the way that we do now in certain sports and all along those lines. So you would go with somebody that was nearby, and I think that that might have been the reason that he went with the Brooklyn Dodgers at that time. And also, I think the Brooklyn Dodgers helped with a lot of the integration as well. So I'm sure that that helped for him wanting to root for them
yes.
also because of Jackie Robinson and things along those lines. So there's no doubt that people do that. And the other thing I was going to say, and then we'll get to Carole King as well, is that it's interesting when people have those baseball memories because I became a Brewers fan when I went to Milwaukee to go to school at Marquette in journalism. So I studied journalism as well and everything like that. George Reedy, who is a LBJ press secretary, who was one of my professors, and I had some other professors as well that you might be familiar with and all along those lines. But I remember 82 was the only time that they were in a pennant race. Unfortunately, they lost that race in the World Series to the St. Louis Cardinals and everything like that. But 82, I remember as a young student, probably 21, 22, getting all excited about watching the celebration and everything like that. But I also knew that I had to study because I was raised to be somewhat academic and everything like that. So I went to our library and thought that I would escape the noise of the celebration. That doesn't work all that well, Jane. So I tried to go down to the basement, just figuring that you could ignore the noise in the basement, but the basement even got the noise down there as well. So as a youngster, I just gave up and joined the celebration. So I went out with the rest of the folks celebrating that particular championship or that particular pennant. And like I said, they eventually lost to the Cardinals in the World Series. But it was fun as a youngster, and hopefully they can come back to those glory days as they have the best record in baseball this year, but they will have to get past the very difficult Dodgers and everything like that. So we'll just see how it plays out and all of that way. Now, coming back to Carole King and everything like that, what are some of the surprising things what made you decide to want to do this book as a journalist? Because you are a journalist like myself and everything. And what are some of the things that surprised you about what you found out about Carole King? Because she does have a rich history, and some of the things, including some of the sad things in her life, people do know. But as you said, there has been a extensive autobiography or a biography of her and all along those lines. So what are some of the things that you learned in this process?
Well, you asked, how did I come to write this book?
Yes.
I've been a fan of hers since Tapestry was released in 1971. I have many, many more of her albums, some of which are really good and get overlooked, but a few of the albums that came out after Tapestry are superb. I went to a few concerts. I saw the play Beautiful, the Carole King musical on Broadway. I saw it actually 3 times.
Wow.
So I have been a fan, but it's really different when you're actually writing an analytical book. So my book is part of something called the Jewish Lives series. It's a series published by Yale University Press about Jews and their impact on civilization, starting, with Abraham and Rebecca in the Bible and up to today. It's really varied, scholars, religious leaders, entertainment figures, all sorts of people are featured in this series. And a few years ago, the editor of the series approached me and said, would you like to contribute something? Would you like to write one of these books? And he asked for some potential names, and we discussed a bunch of stuff. And I always thought that Carole King would be the best because, as you said, there hasn't been a full biographical treatment of her. And so they liked the idea. I had to do a book proposal and all that stuff that authors have to do. But Yale approved it, and that's how I got this contract to start working on it.
And how many other books are there in the series? Because you mentioned Carole King, and it's definitely a not subject that needs to be addressed and dealt with a lot, including other musical legends that are of Jewish descent and everything, because people will be surprised to know that even Sammy Davis Jr. was a member of the Jewish faith and all along those lines and everything like that. But I'm just wondering, because actually my dad's lady love is very much involved in the Jewish community, and you may even know her because she is a New York resident as well, and is very much involved with the KIPP schools and all along those lines, and is an avid dancer. But Linda Bellins is a longtime friend of the family, and is my dad's lady love for longer than he was with my mother and everything, because I think they've been together for 25, 26 years and everything like that. But I know that she's very much an active author and a leadership coach and everything like that.
Well, there are more than 80 books in this series. As I mentioned, they really span both years, centuries, really, and the kinds of people, the subjects that these books are about. There have been books in this series about other musicians. There's a terrific book about Irving Berlin. There's a book about Barbra Streisand. I believe there's a book in the works about Bob Dylan. But to be honest, in the beginning years of this series, it focused more on sort of intellectual leaders, scholars. It is, after all, from the Yale University Press. And then I think it's really been branching out recently. uh, there's been a book about Golda Meir
Mhm.
published recently. There's one that takes a different kind of look at um, at the Diary of Anne Frank. So it's just a wonderful, varied series, and they do a really, really good job of putting it together and obviously publicizing it, which is why I'm on this show.
You have no doubt about that and everything. And you just said something that surprised me that maybe I wasn't aware of and maybe I should have been aware of. But Bob Dylan is a practicing member of the Jewish faith because I did not know that and everything along those lines. Because you mentioned that there was a book about him in this series, and I didn't know that. I knew about Sammy Davis Jr., but I didn't know that Bob Dylan was a practicing member if he's a practicing member.
Well, the the subjects in this series don't necessarily have to be practicing Jews. Carole King certainly isn't. Bob Dylan was born Bob Zimmerman, I believe, and certainly came from a Jewish family. He's had a really interesting and unpredictable religious life. I'm not an expert in him, so I don't want to say any more specifically about that. But the idea of this series is to examine all sorts of Jews. Carole King was born Carol Klein. She grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn in the post-war era. This was at a time when families like her felt very Jewish in terms of the foods that they ate and the holidays they observed, but they weren't religious Jews as we think of religious people. They didn't. They weren't a member of a synagogue. They didn't, keep the Jewish rituals, keeping kosher and the Sabbath and all. But this was a time, Mark, when there were a lot of people like her growing up in these neighborhoods, working class neighborhoods, children and grandchildren of immigrants, who knew they were Jewish and yet also had to be careful about how they presented themselves in the larger society. After all, she changed her name from Klein to King. And she also put the E on Carol. She's Carole. She did that in high school because there were so many girls named Carol in her high school. So this was a time when there was a different kind of Jewish culture emerging. We sometimes call it a secular Jewish culture where people felt very Jewish, in many ways acted as Jews, and yet it was in a different way. It wasn't a religious appearance so much as a cultural one.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. I know a lot of people in society, and I might be stepping on some toes and everything like that. Always think of entertainment as being very having a high Jewish presence and everything like that. So did Carol run into that, and was that a benefit to her or a detriment to her? Because I do know that there are some people through society that have always talked about the amount of people that are of Jewish descent that are in Hollywood or in the music industry or a number of other things. So I was just wondering if that was something that was part of her career trajectory as well, and whether that worked in her favor or not.
Well, it's a really good question. I think that the perception that Jews have been very much involved in Hollywood and other kinds of entertainment and have shaped it, comes from the fact that to a large extent, the American Jews in late 1800s into the 1900s were newcomers. Mm-hmm. And these industries were new. They were, and when you, as a people, are kind of locked out of other industries, banking, law, and there certainly were those kinds of situations in many, many cities. You gravitate towards the things that are new and that are opening up. And this is a very creative people, innovative, scrappy. So I think that's why that happened. Also, music and culture is really, really big in these immigrant communities, and more. I mean, I grew up just outside New York City, I would say we were lower middle class, but my parents loved music. They loved ballet. They figured out all sorts of ways to not spend much money and go to the opera. I mean, it was very important to them. And Carole King grew up in that kind of world where her mother started to teach her piano lessons when she was 4 years old, took her to see Broadway plays, uh, very much caring about, first sort of classical music and then more contemporary music. So I think that it was part of the culture. I'm sure that's changing. I'm sure there are lots of other people of different races and ethnicities and religions in the entertainment industry now. It's a lot more than just Hollywood, as we know. So I think that's evolving. But surely there was a time when the Jewish presence, even if it wasn't as numerous as people might feel, really did help to shape this new kind of industry, and shape the lives of people like her. Her contemporaries were growing up in Brooklyn or Queens: Paul Simon, Neil Sedaka, Barbara Streisand, all of them coming from, scrappy neighborhoods, didn't have, it's not like they had introductions to the music world from their families or anything else. They had to really push their way in. And that's also characterizes her. She was very ambitious. She had a great deal of talent. Yes, it's true that at that time, in the late 50s, early 60s, there were a lot of Jews in popular music. There also were a lot of Black Americans in popular music.
Yeah.
So, I think actually at that time, music was becoming more integrated, certainly in New York. There was the Jewish presence, there was the Black presence, there was a Latino presence because there was so much emigration from Puerto Rico. So there actually were a lot of influences on her. I mean, she used to go hear Black musicians in high school. And I think that created this amazing moment in musical history. And it's because I think that there were so many different cultural references and sort of musical tastes that sometimes came together or at least influenced each other.
And New York had a lot of musical enclaves. At the beginning of the show, I mentioned running into John Greer, who is related. I think he's the uncle, if I remember correctly, to Pam Greer and everything like that. But he was talking about that because he was saying that in the neighborhood he grew up in, Charles Mingus was in that neighborhood. I believe that there were other people that were in that neighborhood, including Roberto Clemente, the famous baseball player, and everything like that. And I think it was in Brooklyn, and there was might have even been Coltrane in that area as well. But I was just wondering, was that part of what was going on? Was there was a lot of these kind of musical communities that were developing at that time that Carole King was coming up? So there was a lot of people. I'm thinking about like even the famous picture Great Day in Harlem, where a lot of these musicians from different groups of ethnicities and different cultures were supporting each other and everything like that. So was that part of what was helping Carole develop at the time that she was developing at the early part of her career?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think what was going on in Harlem was sort of its own thing. She was more part of that, what we call the outer boroughs,
Right.
particularly Brooklyn and Queens. So, but there definitely was a lot of emphasis on music, even in her high school. She went to a big public high school, James Madison High School, and they had a real emphasis on music. Every year, each of the grades would produce their own sort of play or musical presentation. This was called Sing, and they would each of the grades would perform what they have written to the student body, and the students would vote on which grade did the best. This is when there were 3 grades, 10th, 11th, and 12th in the high school, and the years that she was in those grades, her grade won. So there was a lot of emphasis on that. Even to this day, I visited the high school. It's a really amazing place, whole city block, hundreds of students from now all over the world. And there are two pianos in the lobby of the school. One is actually dedicated to her. One is dedicated to some other people who had graduated from the school, and they're just there for students to play. I mean, when I was visiting, this young man just went over and started playing the piano, and so there was that kind of culture then, and it's still there now. So when you start from that in high school, and then you go on, you can see how it becomes a part of the language that that students learn and speak. And then it's true that there was this kind of integration of music, so that when you think about Carole King's earliest and arguably greatest hits songs, "Will You Love Me Tomorrow" and "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman," which she wrote with her then husband, Gerry Goffin, both of those songs were written for Black women. Will You Love Me Tomorrow was specifically written for the Shirelles. And of course, we know Natural Woman was written for Aretha Franklin. And I just find that fascinating, especially because Natural Woman, oh my gosh, I mean, that sounds like it could be in church, right? I mean, even the chord structure in Natural Woman echoes the chord structure you hear in a church. And it's really quite amazing. And there's a kind of cadence in music, and the chords in Natural Woman are sort of informally called the Amen cadence, because that's what they sound like. And Carole King and Gerry Goffin actually listened to gospel radio to get it into their head as they were thinking about this song. So, I've always found that fascinating, that there was a sense that these two Jewish kids knew how to write a song that certainly in the hands of Aretha Franklin is like iconic. Iconic.
It's definitely an iconic song. There's no doubt about that. You mentioned Barbra Streisand, and a late friend of mine. Unfortunately, she passed away, even though she had a rich music career, having played with Sting and having played with a number of other greats, and even having been the musical director of Saturday Night Live. But Catrice Barnes was a family friend from Enfield who passed away, I believe, of breast cancer. I know it's one of the cancers and everything along those lines. But she was an avid Barbra Streisand fan. I know others that were in that fan kind of category of being Barbra Streisand fans. So I was just wondering your thoughts about the relationship between Carole King and Barbra Streisand as they were contemporaries. So did they get along as contemporaries, or were they competing with each other in that musical lane, or what was their relationship like?
Well, as I mentioned, Carole King went to James Madison High School. Barbra Streisand grew up in the adjoining neighborhood, so she went to a different high school, Erasmus High School. And in Carole King's memoir, which she published in 2012, she just hints at first learning about Streisand and her amazing voice. But I don't think they ever really intersected. For one thing is, Streisand wasn't a songwriter. She was a performer from the earliest stages of her career. Whereas for a long time, although she did perform in high school, Carole King really thought of herself as a composer. That is, behind the scenes, perhaps playing piano for someone else like James Taylor on the road. But it took a while for her to think of herself as a performer, whereas I think Barbra Streisand imagined herself a performer at a very early age.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. From doing this book and everything, is that something that you think more people should do if they're thinking about getting involved in the arts, and particularly being singers, is look at not just the in front kind of attitude, which a lot of people, including those on YouTube and particularly our young people, like to do, but also look at the possibility of songwriting and other things that might be more behind the scenes. And I was just wondering if that's something that you see or were observing even as you were doing research in your book.
Well, the truth is, Mark, that in her early years, she was simply a composer. Once she moved to California and became part of the singer-songwriter movement, then that was, comprised of people who performed their own songs. That was a big difference there. And so that's where you hear her perform songs, write and perform songs like You've Got a Friend and other things like that. I think music today is so different because so many artists perform their own songs. But what I think is kind of interesting about composing and having other people perform it, and even in her case, plenty of other people have covered the songs that she has written, even if she's also performed them. I think what's interesting is you take a specific song, and then so many performers can imagine it in different ways and perform it in different ways. Even like we were talking about Natural Woman, right? So on Tapestry, Carole King does her own version of Natural Woman. Now, first of all, I think that was a really courageous move, because who can match Aretha Franklin? But she didn't try, right? She just did it her own way, very slowly. She clearly doesn't have a voice like Aretha or Barbara, but it was very authentic and her way of representing what she thinks the song is about. And if you only write songs for yourself, then you can't appreciate how other people are going to interpret them. And she did. She writes that it was like the most exciting thing to see her songs come alive with other people.
And I've got a friend, I'm going to bring her on, and we got a couple of other folks as well. And I know you've got limited time, but I'm going to bring in Nikki, who is a singer and an actress and a longtime friend of mine. We actually met going back and forth on mass transit and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, and maybe you've got an answer for this, because I know Nikki's also gone through this as well. One of the things I'm hearing you say is that Carole King, and I'm sure it's touched on the book, went through a lot of personal pain and everything like that, and all along those lines. And a lot of times people think that you have to go through those pains in order to be a success in the arts, and particularly as a singer and everything like that. So I was wondering how much of that was true in Carole King's case. How much was she drawing on her personal experience, whether that was in relationships, whether that was in heartbreak and loss in her life, because I know there was loss in her life as well, that she was drawing in some of the songs that she was composing.
Well, that's interesting. She became famous at such an early age. So in her case, it wasn't that there was pain and then there was creativity. I mean, it was mixed all along. I do think that a number of her songs can really be traced to things that happened in her life. So you think of a iconic song from Tapestry, So Far Away. She wrote that when she was in California. She was performing, she was on the road. Her then husband, Charlie Larkey, her second husband, and her then two children, she had two more with him. They were back home in Los Angeles. And, she really missed them, and she was torn. Right? You could hear that anguish in that song about, where do I be, and how am I going to pursue my career with the ones I love back home? So I do think that there were a number of songs like that that resulted from her own experiences. We talked about You've Got a Friend. Mm-hmm. I mean, she wrote that in response to James Taylor's song, Fire and Rain, which was a very plaintive, sad song about losing a friend. And she wanted to write something saying, about you've got a friend. And, I think what characterizes so much of her music, not only that she really touched different feelings that people have, universal feelings, but that there's a kind of latent optimism in her music. It ends with trying to make the best of a situation and then really trying to kind of pitch it forward. So, um, so you think of a song like "It's Too Late" and about a breakup, right? And it's really painful. But then at the very end of the song, she said, "There'll be good times again for me and you. We just can't stay together." So she's like kind of moving away from the grief of the breakup into imagining something better. And I think that's one of many reasons why her songs have lasted, have feel so relevant today.
Wonderful. Jane, right?
Yes. Hi, Nikki.
Hi. That was my mother's name.
Oh, that's very nice.
Beautiful name. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Mark is muted,
Oh,
so we can't hear him. I am
Mark.
going to have to jump off in just a few minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing today.
Yeah,
Oh, it's a
definitely. I
pleasure.
appreciate the sharing and everything like that. Just really quickly, I was just wondering, in that same level and everything along those lines of activism, because you mentioned earlier that she was a very much of a activist and all along those lines. And I do think of those artists of that time, like Richie Havens and Bob Dylan, in that activism space. But is that something that she's coming to more recently, or was she an activist ever since she started her career and everything like that? Because you did mention that she was very active in the environmental movement. So I just wondering if that's something that is more modern or something that she was doing all along during her singing career.
It's a good question. She really wasn't much of an activist for the first decades of her life. I think it's when she moved to Idaho and became really enamored of the environment there, of the Rockies, worried about deforestation, worried about the way the environment was not being preserved. And I think that's what sparked her interest in trying to support political candidates who would preserve the environment and then also supporting legislation. So that's really been her focus. She's been a big supporter of the Democratic Party and the candidates, but I think it's with an eye towards environmental preservation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know you got to go. One of the things I get all my guests to do is to give a message of positivity as they leave and everything along those lines. And also, if you can tell folks where they can get a copy of this book before you depart. And I talked to Nikki and the other guests as well and everything like that. So definitely, how can folks reach you and what is your message of positivity?
Well, you can buy my book online, certainly. If you don't want to buy through Amazon, there's a wonderful site called bookshop.org, which supports independent book sellers. And I think that's a good way to support them. The Jewish Lives site also is selling my book along with many others that they publish. To me, as I said, I think the note of positivity I would like to leave with is what I've learned from her songs, which is the sort of timeless desire for love and friendship and warmth and purpose. And that's what you get from Carole King's songs. And I know for myself, I try to always keep that in mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just really quickly, because I touched on it earlier, and I know you've got to go very shortly and everything, but what were some of the heartaches? Because I kind of touched on it, but what were some of the heartaches that she did have in her life that people may not be aware of, that they will learn about if they go get the book? Because I do know that she had some pain and heartache, but what were some of those pains and heartaches?
Well, starting from childhood, she had her only sibling was a younger brother, 6 years younger than she was, who was born quite disabled and ended up having to be institutionalized. And it was a huge strain on their family. And it's essentially made her an only child. So I think that was very difficult. She did have 4 marriages, um, and each ending in 3 ending in divorce. One, that husband, her third husband, died of a drug overdose. So I think as incredibly successful as she was in her professional life, her personal life really had some challenges. From all I could tell, she's very close to her children, and that has sustained her, I think. But yeah, there's been a lot of pain there, along with a lot of sort of search for feelings and beauty.
Yeah, and like I said, and I'm definitely just gonna be my last question because I know you got to run. What advice would you give to people about that work-life balance and everything, both from studying Carole King, but also your own life? Because you mentioned having a husband that is very supportive and everything like that. And I know a lot of people struggle with that, the work-life balance and everything like that. So, what advice would you give to people to try to maintain that work-life balance in some semblance or way?
I would say to people that you can have it all, just not at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can't have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. You got to balance it and everything like that. Just in your own life, I said that was the last question. I promise this is the last one. How is
Okay.
it good to do the balancing thing? Because I know some people like to be, and I mentioned my own struggle with physical health and sometimes wanting to get out and exercise and not doing that. So, how important do you think balance is in terms of like, because one of my other guests will be very much in the religious space, having the emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, and other types. I guess emotional will be another one. Balance in your life, and how do you do that in your own life? So, what things do you do to maintain that balance?
Well, I exercise about 5 times a week. And even when I had children at home, I would go very, very early to the gym to swim or to work out. That's really important to me because I live in the city. I walk a lot. We're hardly in our car. Uh, my faith is very important to me. I've always been involved in at least one synagogue and attend regularly and have a real community there. So I think those are the 2 things that help me find and keep balance in my life. It's been wonderful to
It's
talk
been
to
a
you.
pleasure talking to
Thank
you.
you
So I'm gonna
so
let
much.
you
Okay, I'm going to have to sign off, but
go.
be well. And I do hope people will buy my book.
I hope people will buy the book as well. It sounds like a very rich book, and hopefully, folks will get that book, learn even more about Carole King, and all along those lines. So I'm gonna let you go because I know you've got another appointment at 5 o'clock, and hopefully, we'll get you back on the network as well. But I have thoroughly learned a lot about Carole King and learned a lot about you as well. So look forward to having further conversations at some time or another. But definitely appreciate it, and I'll try to get a copy of the book myself as well. So thanks for being a guest, and hopefully, we'll have you back in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Mark. Bye-bye.
Bye. Cool. Hey, Gerald, I've got Nikki with him. She'll be joining us as well. But Nikki, you heard a lot of that conversation. I mean, Gerald, you heard a lot of that conversation and everything. And I was just wondering your take on that because it seems like faith was an important part of Carole King's journey. I know it's an important part of your journey as well. And you've written a number of books, 14 books to be exact, and a lot of them deal with faith. You've even part of this notion that a lot of people think of Jesus in the sense of baby Jesus, but you're thinking that Jesus might have even been further back with God and everything like that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that book and even some of God's ties to Mother Nature, because I know that that's something that you talk about in your books as well.
Well, sure. I'd love to share about my books, but let me just say what a privilege it was to listen to Jane. I wish she had been my music teacher when I was back in junior high school. My appreciation for music, the history of what people were working with who and who learned from who, and I thought that was great, and it would made a big difference in me.
Yeah, no doubt. And did you have a particular Carole King song that you were a big fan of?
I'm sorry, did I have a big?
Carole King song that you were a fan of, like Natural Woman or one of the other ones that she was known for?
I did like Natural Woman. I've always had a little bit of a hearing problem. And so I knew either the theme of a song, the title of a song, or something in the chorus, but I never would hear all the words to the song. And so I think YouTube has helped me a great deal. I can look up what are the words on that song, what's the lyrics, and I think, my goodness, I didn't know that was in that song. And it's just helped elevate my appreciation for music quite a bit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. But yeah, tell us about this latest book. 'Cause when I saw the book and you were explaining your philosophy about Jesus Christ and how there are a lot of people, when we think of Jesus Christ and the Christmas season is getting ready to come about, it's always about the birth of Jesus. But it seems like you are of the philosophy that Jesus might have been around even before he came to earth and everything like that. So I was loving to hear more about this book and God's ties to Jesus.
Okay, well, actually, I've got two books along those lines. This is the one you're probably referring to,
Yes.
because Before I Was Jesus. Where was he? What was he doing before he was born in Bethlehem? This one's coming out in just a few weeks. It's called The Innkeeper. It's another look at the Christmas story, but from the innkeeper's perspective. This book about Before I Was Jesus, when you and I pick up the Bible, and you read the very first words, it starts with, in the beginning, God created. And in our imaginations, in our mind, we're picturing God the Father with gray hair or white hair. It's long, he's got a big beard, and he's ancient of days. But when we turn to the Gospel of John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh. That Word, the living Word, was Jesus. He was in the beginning with God. Now, he is God, as Christians call him, God the Son. So there's God the Father, and there's God the Son. Then there's also within the Trinity the God the Holy Spirit. Well, if God was the Father and God was also the Son, both are God, and yet they're distinct. It's one of the mysteries of Christianity. But the question is, John says that it was Jesus that did the creating. It goes on to say, without him, nothing was made that had been made. And when you turn then to the book of Colossians, it picks up that theme in a little more. It says, for by him, referring to Jesus, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. All right, so now I have this competition of thinking in my brain. It says in the beginning God created, but also says in the beginning Jesus created. Well, I have to wrestle with that, but as I keep reading the book of Colossians and the book of Revelation, after Jesus has been exposed to us, Scripture's very plain. It go back and say it was Jesus that God the Father made things through. It was God the Father, but he made things through Jesus, God the Son. So when we would read Genesis 1, in the beginning God created. Was it God? Yes. But it was God the Son, not God the Father. As we keep reading throughout the Old Testament, it says that God is spirit. Well, you don't see a spirit. And that's why it goes on to say that God the Father is invisible. If you were to see him, the Bible tells us, you would come undone. That's a great word, just undone. You would come apart at the seams. Every microbe and chromosome inside of you would just come apart because you would not be able to withstand being in the presence of that eternal grace and glory. All right. So now I'm thinking, if God the Father cannot be seen, then when people in the Old Testament saw God, who did they see? It was God the Son. This is before he came and was born in Bethlehem, but he has always been there. Scripture reassured us, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And through him all things were made. So, if it was Jesus that did the creating, and then later we found that God walks with Adam and Eve in the garden, who was that walked with Adam and Eve? Our mind says God. But the picture in our mind is God the Father, but God the Father cannot be seen. So it must be God the Son. Whenever Abraham met with God, and it says that God enjoyed him as a friend, he could sit and talk face to face like a man. Well, who did Abraham see? It could not be God the Father, because God the Father is invisible, spirit, and cannot be seen. If you do see him, you come undone. When God made an appearance to the parents of Samson to say to them, you are going to have a child, and this is the way I want you to raise him. They become very afraid after that conversation. They said, oh no, we have seen God. We are going to die. But they didn't die. Yes, they saw God, but while they thought they were seeing God the Father, who you can't see, they were actually seeing God the Son. And so throughout Scripture, throughout the Old Testament, anytime God was seen, even Moses, when he was hid in the cleft of the rock and the person of God walks by, and he's able to turn and see just a small splittering of the glory of God, that was not God the Father, or he would have died and become undone. It must have been God the Son. So I find that Jesus, before he became born in Bethlehem, has had this history of events and expressions with Israel throughout history. We have a lot of phrases by which we call God, Jehovah Jireh, our God who provides, Jehovah Rapha, or Jehovah Sabaoth. We have references to God when it says that he was with Abraham, when he was with Moses. How about when he was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Remember, they were thrown into a fiery furnace, and the king said, oh, how many people did we throw in there? Everybody says 3. He said, well, why do I see 4? And the 4th one is like God, or the Son of God. Well, who was it? It was the Son of God. It was God the Son. So when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, that was just one more ingredient, one more time he was seen. He came with a purpose. Every time Jesus came, he comes with a name, whether that was Jehovah Rapha or Jehovah Jireh, El Shaddai, or just El. He had lots of names, but each of those names meant something. He was saying, you need salvation. I am Jehovah, or Jesus, Yeshua. I am the God who saves. That's what you need. You need a God who provides. I am Jehovah Rapha, or I am a Jehovah, pick another name. Well, each time God reveals himself in some characteristic, people are thinking, well, who are you? What's your name? He says, well, what you need to know right now is I am.
Remember, along those same lines and everything like that, because I've had a couple of other religious guests on this show and other shows as well. I was just wondering your thoughts, Gerald, and everything, because we live in a very divided time right now, and there's a lot of people that are concerned about the different religions, whether it's Eastern religions or Western religions and everything like that. But I remember, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, I think my dad showed it to me and everything. It was one of the famous anchors. It might have been Ted Koppel or Peter Jennings, but they did a piece on world religions, and they found that despite the turmoil that we have now, like between the Jews and the Muslims in Israel and some of the other turmoils that exist and everything, there is more in common with the religions than is opposite of the religions. And that's what he found in his study and everything. So a lot of the religions have common principles, and it's extremes on all of the religions that cause a lot of the turmoil, whether that's the turmoil of the Crusades or what Hamas did or a number of other things. But the common sense of respect Mother Nature, respect your parents, and other things are common across the religious spectrum. But I was just wondering your take on that, because I do know that there are some religions that think it is their way or the highway in terms of who can make it to heaven's gates.
Right. You're so right. Well, there is some truth to that. That almost all religions want people to be good, do right, do justice, and in essence, be nice.
Right.
Everybody seems to want that. But for every other religion outside of Christianity, that's kind of based on this is what you do to prove that you're a good guy.
Right.
And we begin to think our life is like a scale, and we have good deeds and we have bad deeds. And if our good outweighs the bad, we go to heaven. Well, that's a very you work for it kind of religion. Christianity is completely opposite. You do not work for it. In fact, it says you try to work for it, but you don't get to heaven by what you do. You get to heaven by who did something for you, and that was Jesus. He died to take away your sin, so that all the bad that's in your life, whether it's a lot or a little, it's taken away. And it's a very exclusive religion. It is. People would say, if there's only one way to get to heaven, and that's Jesus, why would God only make one way? I have a different question. If people are sinners, why would God make a way at all? Why would he want people in heaven? Why would he do anything to regather us and to make us clean? Well, the truth is he made us in his image. He wants a family. He wants to love us, and he wants us to love him. So he came to pay a price. He says, I'll die in your place. Sin means death. It's always been a good picture in my mind. If you had a chandelier, big, heavy chandelier hanging above you, and it was held together by maybe 100 links of chain. How many links in that chain have to break before you are in big trouble?
It can be just one link you can break.
Just one. That's right. And so that's what God's saying, that any sin at all makes you worthy of death. The wages of sin is death. Does that mean all sins are equal? No, but it means that any sin disqualifies us from heaven. Whether we have one chain link that breaks in our ethics and morality, or 1,000, God says, I want a way to make it possible for you to come back and be with me, for you to enjoy me. We have to get rid of that sin. So God sent his son to die so that our sin would be taken away.
That makes a lot of sense. Everything. On one of our other shows, we were talking about this. It might have been Urban Center or one of the other ones. And I was just wondering your thought on this notion of not just us, because I know you've written a couple of books about Mother Nature too, including some unusual animals and all along those lines. But do animals have souls? And if so, are they part of the greater conversation and everything like that? Because I've heard some people that have even speculated that maybe they were here in a past life as a bird or as a squirrel or as some other animals if they believe in reincarnation. And I'm not saying that everybody has to believe in reincarnation, but I just wanted your take on this notion as to whether animals and even trees, because I know some native cultures that would say that trees have souls as well, but I just wanted your take on that.
The more I get into this, the more I am astounded by the glory of God expressed through nature. I got so astounded. First time I ever heard about a woodpecker. Somebody told me a woodpecker uses its tongue to reach into the tree and down in the tree where there are bugs. He grabs the bugs with his tongue and pulls them out. Well, his tongue has to be so long, it's actually too long for his mouth.
Right.
So here's a woodpecker with a tongue that's too long for its mouth, but you never see it flapping in the wind when you see a woodpecker fly. Why not? He wraps it around his head, around his neck, takes the tip, and puts up his right nostril. Now, that's weird. Why would God make an animal like that? And again, the Bible says that he made all things according to his will. He liked it. So I wrote a book called Because He Liked It. And it's 101 different odd, weird animals that God made. We did it in cartoon form, so it's good for both adults and kids. But every one shows the glory of God through the things that he made. I learned about a crocodile, a particular one that I can imagine. It must have been funny on the day God made him. God probably said something like, okay, Mr. Crocodile, before you go out in the water to get something to eat, I want you to stop on the edge of the water and eat. He said, now, wait a minute. I'm supposed to go eat before I go get food to eat? God says, that's right. And he said, well, what should I eat before I go out to eat? He said, I want you to eat rocks. I can imagine the crocodile thinking, wait a minute, you want crocs to eat rocks? God said, yes. He said, well, why would I do that? And God may have said, well, there's 3 reasons. Number one, you're going to want to lay on the bottom of the river. You can't do that. You can get down there, but as you live there after a few moments, you're going to start to float upward. As you float upward, you need a weight to pull you back down. If you eat rocks, it will give you a weight in your stomach, and that will let you stay on the bottom of the river. Secondly, I'm going to give you a mouth that's able to chomp food, but you cannot chew it up. There is no ability for a crocodile to chew his food like you chew a hamburger. He chomps and swallows. Something has to churn up that food so he can digest it. Rocks in his stomach will do that. As the rocks tumble and turn, it crushes the food. He's able to digest it. Thirdly, there was no ballast or weight in the crocodile to keep him upright in the water. So while he might want to have his head up above the water, instead, he's more like that. He's laying flat on the water, and he would roll over and drown if there was a wave that came by. That's not a good idea. So God said, if you eat the rocks, it will give you weight in your stomach. It will keep your head upright. So yes, I'm making crocs to eat rocks. And so we titled the second book by that, Crocs Eat Rocks. And the more I view the animal kingdom, the more astonished I am at the creativity of God. And that happens whether it's in the animal world or in the plant world. You mentioned trees, flowers. And I've done another book on them. I've done a book on plants. I've done another one on Earth and the cosmos, strange, odd things about the planet Earth and space that God made. And everywhere I look, I see God's glory radiating out. I think, wow, I'm more and more taken with the awness and the inspiringness of God in his majesty.
There's no doubt about that. God is amazing and everything. But I did have a question that's come up on this show, and it's me and my odd thinking, because I will admit that I have some unusual thoughts and odd thinking sometimes, because I can be a unique character and all along those lines. But in the Bible, we know Jesus when he was born. Like I said, Christmas is not that far away. We're in October and everything like that. And we know the miracles that Jesus accomplished when he was a teenager. And I have got two nephews. They just turned 2008, 2009, and this is 2025. So they just turned 16 and 17, respectively, back in August and everything. So I have watched them grow up, and they've grown up bigger than me and everything along those lines. And I know that parents have kids that can be cantankerous, and I'm imagining that even though he was the Son of God and everything, that Mary and Jesus must have had the time that maybe Jesus wasn't cooperating and everything along those lines. So I was just wondering, maybe that's the lost scrolls and everything, what you're finding out about the period of Jesus from the time that they were a baby, and babies can do stuff like having to have diapers. They didn't have diapers in Jesus' time and everything, but they can definitely have to have things change and everything. So the time that Jesus was born, which is, we know the birth story and everything, to the time of the miracles, have you found any research in your own books or your own speculation about what was going on during that time?
Well, all I can say is I would hate to have been one of the brothers or sisters of Jesus.
Right.
Where mom and dad would say, why can't you be more like Jesus?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, the Bible says that when he was at the marriage of Cana and he turned water into wine, that was the beginning of his miracles. Right. So I don't have any record of miracles before that time. Right. It does say also that he was without sin. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that he was like us, and the Bible says he was tempted like us, but he was without sin. So you may have had a different mind, attitude, and decisions from his parents growing up, and especially as a teenager. But I think he was able to have those challenges still without crossing the line into sin.
But what would be a sin? That's what I'm saying. Because is it a sin to be upset at your parents, or is it a sin to be like wanting to challenge your parents and everything like that? Because that's what I'm wondering. Did he challenge his parents the way that teenagers do?
It's really not. It's how to work that out, because Jesus was not a teenager. He was a full-grown man. As he was about to go to the cross, and he knew that was coming. Mm-hmm. He said, Father, not my will, but yours.
Right.
He's saying, I have a different will than you do, but you are my authority figure. I will follow what you say. Right. And so I can only imagine that attitude was present as a teenager as well. He may have been frustrated, thinking differently than mom or dad did, right. But he reached a point of saying, I'm not going to trespass. I'm not going to step across that line into rebellion.
Right.
I will submit myself to them.
Yeah, that can make sense. I can see that. You mentioned in one of your books, because a lot of times people get lost in history and everything like that. And I know this is all speculation, but what are you finding out about the innkeeper? Because there's innkeepers even now. People that are literally, I mentioned I went to hang out at a hotel and everything. And that's an inn and everything like that. So what was your take on the innkeeper, and what did you learn about the innkeeper?
Well, it's really interesting. The story of the innkeeper actually starts way back in the Old Testament in Genesis. Back at that time, there was a man by the name of Jacob who had married a lady named Rachel. She was pregnant. They were on their way to a place called Ephrath. And it says that along the way, she was heavy with child. She produced a child, but she died in childbirth. When her handmaiden came to her, she said, here's your baby. Name him. And she said, call the baby Ben, which meant son of, Ben Omi, or son of my sorrow. And she died. Jacob comes in and says, oh no, we're not labeling that child with a name like that. That will follow him all of his life. We will name him Ben son of Jamin, Benjamin, son of my right hand. Now we hold that thought. They were on their way to a place called Ephrath, and Jacob then builds a tower. I don't know what it looks like, but it was a memorial to Rachel, having produced this child and being the love of his life. It was a memorial to her. Now, as you read that, it says he built this tower on the way to Ephrath. In parentheses, it says, which is Bethlehem. Oh, so there was a tower built at Bethlehem. Right. In Malachi, it refers to that tower, and they called it the Tower of the Flock. Yeah. So now apparently they're raising sheep there. Bethlehem is only a few miles away from Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. On the Day of Atonement, before the Day of Atonement, the high priest has to leave Jerusalem, go to Bethlehem to pick out a lamb that is perfect, without blemish. And he is to take that back to Jerusalem to give us a sacrifice on the Day of Atonement. Well, to make sure that these sheep that he chooses from are perfect and without blemish, they assign some of the priests to be there and raise the sheep. So the sheep raised in Bethlehem are the ones prepared for the Day of Atonement and other high occasions where there would be a need for a lamb that was perfect. Well, they had priestly shepherds, or we would call them rabbinical, like a rabbi, rabbinical shepherds. When the angels appeared at the time of Jesus' birth to the shepherds in the field, I don't believe these were common everyday shepherds. They were the rabbinical shepherds who were raising sheep at the Tower of the Flock. Mm-hmm. When the angel said, go and find that baby, he'll be wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger, he gave no other directions. I think he didn't need to. The shepherds knew, we have a tower, we have a tower, we have a manger, we have swaddling clothes that we wrap the perfect baby lambs in so they don't get hurt, so there's no broken bone, so they don't fall down and become blemished. Well, that's the same description that was given of Jesus being born at Bethlehem, lying in the manger. What if those shepherds that were approached by the angels were the rabbinical shepherds, and on the day that they were told to go find this baby wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in the manger, what if it was their manger where the lambs were to be born and raised for the Day of Atonement? And that seems to be exactly what happened when Jesus became of age, had his ministry, and then had been born in Bethlehem. At this time, it says that the Bible calls him the Lamb that was slain from the foundations of the earth. In other words, God knew ahead of time that a lamb or Jesus would be crucified. Mm-hmm. He would be chosen, taken on the Day of Atonement to die to take away the sin of the world. Mm-hmm. So this innkeeper, if you've ever been to the Middle East and gone to a shop or a market, there are people everywhere. I mean, it's like Black Friday?
Yeah.
That we have, and the masses of people are hovering over the store waiting to open. Suppose you get there and you think, oh my word, I can't even get into that store. There's no room for me. Well, I think that's exactly what Joseph went through when he got to the inn and there was no room at the inn. The Bible does not say that he met the innkeeper. It doesn't say the innkeeper said, no, go away. I don't have any room. It doesn't say it. The innkeeper said, go out and find a barn. It doesn't say that. It just says there was no room for him. So my story picks up on that and says, so what if Joseph and Mary go out and they find this tower? He nestles her down into the hay or the straw. She has the baby. He's wrapped up, laid there in the manger. And what if the next day somebody says, boy, that was quite a crowd we had last night. Hey, Mr. Innkeeper, I'll bet you made a pretty penny. But what happened with that woman that was heavy with child and was supposed to give birth? And he's thinking, what woman? What child? What baby? So he goes to find them.
Mm-hmm.
And now, it says later the wise men came.
Right.
When the wise men came to find Jesus, the result was the Caesar said, kill all the babies 2 years old and younger, because somebody thinks there's a king that's being born and he will not take over my throne. Well, apparently that was 2 years after the birth of Jesus. They didn't show up there the night the angels did and the shepherds did. And when it says that you will find that child, it uses the phrase child like a toddler up to 2 years of age.
Mhm.
So where have Mary and Joseph been for 2 years? Apparently in Bethlehem. Doing what? Well, I'm guessing Joseph started his carpentry business.
Right.
What it says that the wise men came to the house where Jesus was. What house? All we know about is a manger, maybe that was in the tower. Well, what if the innkeeper and Joseph decided, hey, let me ask about your wife. Had she have that baby? Everybody's gone now. I've got room at the inn. Why don't you all come and stay there for a while? While you're there, you can pay me by doing some carpentry work. Maybe you could set up your own business here. And what if Joseph set up his carpentry business with the innkeeper for up to 2 years? We don't know. There's nothing in the Bible that says he did, but there's nothing that says he didn't. We know he was there for up to 2 years. So the story, the innkeeper, is about a man who goes to the Holy Land at Christmas to find something more about Christmas, something more than just the usual story that you hear year after year.
Yeah,
He runs into an innkeeper who says, let me tell you the way it really happened. My great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was that original innkeeper.
And he tells the story from that perspective. That makes sense and everything. I know another thing that goes on in religion regularly and everything, and I was wondering your take on this, because I know the famous quote, nobody shall know the day or time, and all along those lines, but it seems that a lot of people don't heed that message, even though it's plainly in the Bible and everything, and they try to guess based on passages in the Bible, based on different things with the calendar, based on speculation or prophecies or things along those lines, when the second coming will come around, and when the whole series around Revelations will come to pass and everything like that. But I just wanted your take on that, because I think it was just last week that we had some people that were speculating that it was going to be in either August or July of this year and everything. But I'm very familiar with that passage that nobody knows the day or time but God himself.
Well, the key to that is nobody.
Nobody, right?
Nobody knows. When the disciples asked Jesus, when will it be? He said, only the Father knows. It's on the Father's calendar, not mine.
Right.
Jesus didn't know. And if Jesus didn't know, why would God tell one of us? Why would he tell me? He's not. And therefore, if someone says, I know the day and the time, they are a false prophet. No matter how many other good things they say, they are not right.
Right.
Yeah. Jesus said it will be like a thief in the night. If you knew when it was, you'd be ready. But you don't know. So be ready anyway. It could be
ready anyway and everything like that. I have seen some, and I don't know if you've ever written a book about it, but I have seen some good books and movies that talk about the rapture and all along those lines, because the rapture that was thought about in the biblical times, when we were a horse and buggy culture, would be much different than the rapture of now, because a lot of people are on the highways and driving cars. So if it's going to take place the way that it has been speculated, there could be a lot of turmoil, but I'm sure that God above would figure out a way to make it not as bad as it could be, because you just lift people as they're driving out of a car, then you could have some serious fender benders and all along those lines. So I don't know if you've ever written any dystopian kind of books about what a rapture would look like in the modern day times.
No, I have not, and I probably will not. I've learned something very special. There is a God, and I am not him.
I understand that.
And, God has a plan. I have to trust him with it. Whatever that plan is, he will work it out. Whatever the details are, however it falls out, that's up to him. And I could speculate, but my ideas are not worth any more than your ideas are.
Right. And like I said, he is the God of the most powerful God, so he can figure out a way to even stop the cars. So he can make it happen that nothing happens to the cars other than they stop in the middle of the road and it looks like a cartoon and everything like that, because he's got that kind of power.
That's right. So I leave that in God's hands. I'm not him. He's a lot smarter than me, and I'll just let him handle that.
I understand. There was a church that used to meet at the Cultural Arts Center that I'm part of and everything, and they would sometimes talk about a part of the Bible that is sometimes not as touched on as much as it probably should be and everything like that. And no matter what you think of women leaders in the church, there are a number of great women in the Bible that aren't always mentioned by church leaders. So I just wondered, did your book at all, or any of your books, talk about not just Eve, but Ruth and a lot of the great women of the Bible? Because there are a number of great women that are in the Bible, including Mary, who we kind of alluded to, and everything like that. But I just wondered, did any of your books touch on the story of the women in the Bible?
No, I have written and I've spoken on occasion about specific women who were highly recognized by God as well as people. And, you know, we really get onto shaky ground when we get to topics like Mary, because I heard her saying one time, the Catholics adore her, the Protestants ignore her.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some truth to that. As a Protestant, we're kind of not sure how much to say in adoration or in recognition of special people, because we don't know how that's going to shake out with others. But God has called on women an awful lot. He has raised up women. There was one woman who was one of the judges in the book of Judges. And if God chooses her, that's okay. Let me say it this way. There's a difference between God using a woman in an exalted way and assigning a woman a specific office within the church. And I'm going to let the local churches figure that one out.
Yep.
I see what the Bible has to say, and I lean toward my interpretation of that. But to say that church should or should not, I don't have that authority.
Mm-hmm.
I do have my belief, and I have my reasons for it, but I'm not going to throw that into the swimming pool and make it all muddy.
You mentioned, yeah, I understand, and that makes a lot of logical sense and everything like that. Speaking of things getting muddy and everything, can an animal that has been seen as a evil animal ever get its act cleaned up and everything like that? Because I've heard some people just in casual conversation speculate about the snake and the reason that the snake did what the snake did and everything like that. And there's some people that I guess are fans of serpents and everything like that. I've never been one, never had one in my life, but I know people that actually collect snakes and everything like that. But I just wondered, can an animal in your mind, or have you ever written about an animal that might have cleaned up its act from its original story, the way that it was told originally and everything like that? Because I know from the original stories, the snake is not a good character in the book of Genesis.
I'm sorry now. Let's rephrase the question one more time. I got mixed on it.
No, I'm just wondering, can an animal like the snake ever have its image polished? And is there any books that you've written that highlight some positive natures of some of the negative animals? And the most negative animal in the Bible is the snake, because of what the snake did in the Garden of Eden.
Well, for me personally, all snakes are deadly because they can give me a heart attack,
Right.
even if they're harmless. But I am mystified by how they move. And yet, as I've studied them, I've learned an awful lot about the unique characteristics that God put in them. Now, having said that, I do believe that Satan appeared as a snake. He took that form somehow. I don't believe that all snakes pertain to what he did there, but I do believe that you kind of leaned toward this earlier. Do animals have a soul?
Right.
I think not. And will they be in heaven? That's a good question. I believe there will be animals in heaven, because the book of Revelation says that the fish in the sea and all the animals, everything will praise God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there must be animals there. Are they the animals that we had as pets while we grew up? Do animals live a life like we do, die, and then go to heaven? I am not sold on that. I don't find any scripture for that. I don't find any scripture against it. But here's the way I interpret what scripture says, that mankind is made with three parts. We have a body,
Right.
a spirit, and a soul.
Right.
The body is our flesh. The spirit, the soul is you. It's what's you that's different from me. It's
Right.
I'm different from my wife. It's our personality, our likes, our dislikes. It's us. But the spirit, that's different. That's the part of us that connects with God. When God said to Adam and Eve, "In the day you eat the fruit thereof, you will surely die," well, they did die, not physically, not their personality, but the part of them that wanted God and desired God, that part of them died. When God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply," you can only multiply what you have. They had a body, they had a personality. They can give that to their children. But they did not have the desire for God. And that's why Paul says we are all born in sin. That's why Jesus said, Nicodemus, you've got body and flesh and personality, but you still need to be born again. Because what's born of flesh is flesh. What's born of spirit is spirit. Therefore, we talk about Jesus. What about animals? There's nothing that says that Jesus came to save, like he does us, the animals, in order to get them into heaven. They are animals. Yeah, animals seem to be more of a tool that God uses for us and for his own enjoyment. But to have one resurrected, there's nothing about that in the Bible.
Nothing at all. Just really quickly, we're going to wrap up very shortly and everything, because I try to keep these under 2 hours and everything along those lines. And I will ask you the same question that I asked the other guests as well. But just really quickly, a lot of people, when they think about the Bible, they think about the Bible in the sense of some things that are factual, like they are known to be facts and everything, like the whole notion of the crucifixion and all along those lines. And then there are things that people say are more metaphor than actuality and everything, because they say that some people, not saying all people, but they say that the Bible is a mixture of both stories that are totally 100% factual and those that are more like metaphors and things along those lines. I'm thinking about like the burning bush, and I'm also thinking about the logic of Noah and everything, because you have two animals of each kind in a boat. That's a lot of animals and that's a lot of weight. So some people would be like, how is that even possible? And everything like that. So I was just wondering your thoughts on people that are trying to figure out how much of the Bible is actual fact and how much of it is kind of like metaphors and other ways of telling the story.
Okay. First of all, I would say the job of the Holy Spirit is to lead us, to guide us into all truth.
Right.
Having understood that, we would ask the question, is this part of the Bible literally true?
Right.
Or is it metaphor? Is it a way of speaking? See, we have books in the Bible that are written poetically. We have a whole 5 books that are called the poetical books.
Right.
You cannot read them as you would history.
Right.
They are poetical. And you don't want to say that people never overemphasize something. Like, you know, I have Big Brother. He might say, I'm going to beat you to a pulp.
Right.
Well, do you take that literally? No. He's speaking in hyperbole.
Right.
He's talking about an exaggerated form of expression. He might say that he meant it, but to be literal, no.
Right.
Are there things that people express things in the Bible in a hyperbolic way?
Right.
Yeah, sure they did. Did they speak in words of anger and expressions that were more forceful than what might be literally true? Yes. But are there times that God spoke and things happened? They are recorded as a truth.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Are they to be taken as truth? Yes. How do you determine the difference? Rely on the Holy Spirit and do your study to find out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, because I know some people that just are speculating, even like with the story of knowing everything, and they're going like, a boat, an elephant, a rhinoceros, 2 of them, and they just think about all the massive amount of weight and everything that would take. But I'm not saying, because I wasn't there, it might have been possible that boat would fill with every last one of those animals.
I have if you ever get the chance, go to see what they call the Ark Experience. It's up near Cincinnati.
Okay.
It's and they have built the Ark, a replica of what they imagined the Ark could have been like, according to all the design and all the measurements given in the Bible. And it is phenomenal. You walk in and it's like being in a shopping mall. There's a place for food. There's a place for fresh water. There's a hydraulic system to clean out where the animals would have been pooping and messing with the food. There's a place for the food for the animals. There's a place. They have it so architecturally designed. You walk in and you think, by golly, it could have been.
Oh, yeah.
It really could have been. It's an amazing experience. The Ark, yes, I think they call it the Ark Encounter.
The Ark Encounter. I have to check that out. But you're right. There's a lot of things that are amazing, and sometimes people try to put it on extraterrestrials and other people like that. But I am amazed at the irrigation system of the people that were in Peru with the Incas and stuff like that, and the pyramids and a number of other things that we still to this day cannot really explain, and they try to speculate as to how they were created and all along those lines. But until you make it to heaven and God himself tells you how it was done, we may never know here on this earthly plane. But there are a lot of things that are very much modern day miracles that have been around forever. Like I said, those are 2 examples. I'm sure there are other ones that you can think of as well, but I definitely think of the thing in Peru, the irrigation system that was not, I mean, it was even in some ways more complicated than our own irrigation systems in the 21st century that they had in the South America and all along those lines. And definitely what was going on with Egypt, the way that they built those massive pyramids.
That's right. They had smart people living back then too.
They did. They had a lot of smart people that were living back then. They were able to do things that even puzzle our minds in the 21st century. But like I said, if
right.
you ever get up there and meet those smart people, because hopefully those smart people are up in heaven, they can might be like, y'all could have done it. We tried to give y'all a framework, but you didn't want to take the framework. But yeah, it's amazing the things that go on. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, both with you and with Jane. I know Nikki popped in briefly and everything, and she might pop in on one of our other shows and everything. But if you will, as you get ready to leave, like I told with Jane, tell folks how you can be reached, how folks can get these 14 books of yours, and we've alluded to about 5 or 6 of them and everything like that. And also, if you've got a message of positivity that you want to share with our audience, because that's something I try to do with every show, call it my own form of a ministry, as I would like people to pass positivity, because we hear enough negative news and enough negative stuff in the world. So I figure if I can get everybody to spread at least just a little bit of positivity, I'm doing my little step to help the world.
Okay. My books, most of my books can be found on Amazon. And probably the more famous one among them is one called Cat and Dog Theology. Mm-hmm. And there was a follow-up to that. That one has a subtitle called Rethinking Your Relationship with Your Master. That so many people will call God Master, but they treat him like a staff member. And, God, do this, take care of that, watch over this, give me that. Thank you. You can go now. As if God's a staff member, we can order him around. Cat and Dog Theology is about rethinking that relationship and making sure you're on the right end of the hierarchy of that. They say dogs have masters, cats have staff. Yeah. And a dog will look at you and say, you feed me, you pet me, you shelter me, you love me. And so he concludes, wow, you must be God. A cat will look at you and say, you feed me, you pet me, you shelter me, you love me. Wow, I must be God. And so many people, they don't say, I must be God. But what they do say is, life is all about me. God is there to make my life safe, soft, easy, and comfortable. And when he doesn't do that, I'm going to challenge him. And we don't do it directly, but we say things like, God, why did you let that happen? And I found that almost never is that a real question. It's more of an accusation. God, you didn't do your God job very well. Not the way I see it. You could have done this. Why did you let that happen when you could have stopped it? And so that book really helps get things organized in your life. But again,
before you get to your message of positivity along those same lines, because I've had a couple of friends that have had recent tragedies in their life and everything. And I know a lot of times people are wanting to blame God for those tragedies, whether it's a death of a young one or a tragic loss in an accident and everything like that. So I'm imagining part of that you deal with in the book, but what is your answer to folks that are upset and they're wanting God to have intervened, as you just put it earlier, yes, and are wondering why these tragic things happened and everything? I mean, I'm sure there's a number of people, I forget the amount of people, it's been like hundreds of thousands, if not close to 1 million deaths in Ukraine and Russia and everything. And I'm sure there are people in that country, just like there are people in Israel that are, on both the Jewish and the Palestinian side, that are wondering, why now? Why haven't you intervened? And all along those lines and everything. And I'm not trying to put words in people's mouth, but I do know human nature and everything. So I'm sure there are people in those areas that are probably asking that question.
Yes, so many people do. We all have crisis. We all have tragedy. We all have heartache. And we often wonder why. I would just encourage people to make it a question, not an accusation.
Right.
Jesus even spoke of one occasion very similar to that. He said, I'll bet you're wondering about the people over where the Tower of Siloam fell. And I think it was like 18 people died. He's saying, I know you have questions about that. God, I am convinced, has it all in control. And I lean more to his understanding. When the occasion of a crisis comes, my father, he passed away a few years ago during COVID. Mm-hmm. And he was one of those that went into a hospital We could not go. We couldn't visit. He died there, and I never saw him from the day he went in until the day of his funeral.
Right.
And you wonder why. Well, see, I can wonder the same thing about me. Some years back, a doctor diagnosed me with tongue cancer.
Mhm.
And um, when you're a public speaker, that's not something you want. Tongue
Right.
cancer? He said, that's got to come out. I said, what has to come out? He said, the cancer. And I thought, wow, good. Okay, I thought you meant my tongue. He said, well, that's where it is. That's part of your tongue that has to come out. I said, how much? He said, we don't know until we get in there. After the surgery, he said, you were quite fortunate. We had some tongue material that we were able to graft on like a Band-Aid. Now, it's not going to stay there. It will, in a sense, die, shrink off, and fall off, and you'll either swallow it in your sleep or you'll spit it out. I thought, ooh, that's gross. You put a you put that in my mouth? He said, yes. Well, wait a minute. Where did you get tongue material like that? He said, we got it from a cadaver. A dead guy? He said, yes. He wasn't using it anymore.
Right.
So now I've got a dead guy's partial tongue in my mouth. And I'm stumbling to talk. I could not eat normal food for 6 months. And then the cancer came back. I had another surgery. They took part of my arm to make half a tongue. So I've been teaching my arm to talk. People think I have an accent. No, I have an impediment. And it's because of that tongue cancer. I could ask God, why did you let that happen? As if I were accusing him. God, don't you know I'm a preacher? Don't you know I like to talk? Don't you know I need to talk? God's saying, I got everything in control. Have you ever thought about writing instead of talking? I have other plans for you.
Right.
Now let's change gears. And in the Bible, there's the story of Job, who lost his entire family. Now, can you imagine those boys of Job showing up in heaven? And they're saying, God, what happened? And God says, well, I had plans, and part of that plan was to have you in heaven. Yeah, but we had other plans. We were going to get married. We wanted to have kids. We wanted to see our grandkids grow up. We had a business to run. What about this? What about that? God said, oh, I'm sorry. Did I say something that made you think your life was all about you? You see, you played your role in being a part of your father's life. Now I've removed you from that role to teach your father a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait a minute, God. I can imagine them thinking, you wanted to teach Dad a lesson? Why didn't you take him home and leave us there? God said, well, I wanted to do something with your father that people will talk about for thousands of years to come.
Right.
Let me do that. And we talked about the patience of Job and the faith of Job and how that was an ideal but troublesome situation. We could sit around and accuse God of not making our life safe or soft or easy or comfortable, but he's after bigger things.
That makes a lot of sense. So your message of positivity, then I got to get this commercial about educators and get us on out of here in the next 5 or 6 minutes. But yes, give us your message of positivity.
Message of positivity. Don't be satisfied with being happy. Look for joy. Joy takes more time and it's a much deeper thing. Happiness is something that happens and it makes you feel good. Joy is something that comes to you and within you. You sense it. When there was a day I looked at my wife, boy, she was dressed nice. And her hair was fixed just right. Her complexion, her makeup, everything was just gorgeous. And I thought, wow, you are so hot. And I was watching TV, but I saw her out of the corner of my eye. And when I saw her, I wanted to say, wow, don't you look good? But I hesitated. And in that hesitation, she left the room. And when she did, I felt a loss within me. And I had missed the opportunity to say something that made her feel delightful and that made me feel good, because she would have responded to me, and I missed a moment of joy. When you miss it, you actually feel a loss. Happiness isn't like that. Happiness happens to you. It's a delightful thing that's in your sight, in your experience. It makes you happy for a moment. But joy is deep seated. Joy comes when you receive something precious. When I proposed marriage to my wife, I gave her a ring, I slipped it on her hand. It did everything it was supposed to do. It sparkled, it bedazzled, it glowed, it glistened. And when she received it, did she feel happy or joy? That was joy. It was deep seated. Yes, it was a gift that came to her, but she knew that there was a love base that was rooted in my heart, and it expressed something to her. That was joy. And so I would express to people, quit looking for happiness when you can find long-term joy.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Before I get to this commercial, that reminds me of a Facebook post I saw on somebody that's not in my friend circle, but it was like somebody that just posted it, but it was a very interesting concept. And it was kind of what you just said, because they were upset. It might have been in one of my single group that I belong to and everything like that. But the woman was complaining because she had said that she had this guy that she really liked a lot and everything like that. And she asked him to give she asked him to give her a ring, and when he gave the ring, she was upset because the ring was too small, and she wanted him to propose to her in front of her friends and family, so to make it a bigger spectacle. And he decided that she was too much work, so she left her and everything, and now she's regretting that decision that she made, when she should have accepted the small ring and just gone with where he proposed to her, versus trying to make it a big spectacle, because that's where she was complaining. And a lot of people in that group were saying that you're the one that made the mistake because you tried to make it a spectacle and everything like that.
Yeah, she was looking for the happiness of that ring that would come to her, when she should have been looking for the joy that came from him.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. So I appreciate that. And on that note, I'm going to go out here with this education note. You and Jane were great guests. I remember you've been on before and everything, but we'll definitely see you in the future here in Pod TV. And this has been a great show, and we look forward to hearing more about things that you're doing and all along those lines. So get ready to get on out of here. So
thank you, Mark. I appreciate you.
No problem. So we'll get ready out of here, and we'll see you in the not too distant future. And we'll be back with another online dinner party on the 15th, which will be next Wednesday, with some more amazing guests. But definitely you and Jane were great. And it was great learning about your thoughts around religion and her thoughts around Carole King. So this is what the dinner party is. We bring different guests on, and we learn from each other and even share with each other as well. So on that note, we're going to get out of here and learn about the people in education, including the behind the scenes people like the janitor and the guidance counselor and others, and how they are rewarded in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But right now, let's get on out of here. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top.
Life is like a roller coaster. You never know what's coming next. Have life's events caused you to give up on yourself? You may have realized that time passes quicker than you expected, and you can no longer avoid your truth. Do you feel like giving up? In The Bounce Back, Dr. Taz explains how her life went off track, the damage it caused her mental and physical health and goals, and how she is now taking care of her needs. Get advice from Dr. Taz on how to properly care for yourself. The Bounce Back from Dr. Teresa A. Smith, available now.